Hello, hello, hello. So, you are watching this video to learn what is literary nonfiction. So, let's look first at the term and see if we can figure anything out about it. So, first we have the word literary and then we have the word nonfiction. Let's start with the easier one of those two words, nonfiction. What does nonfiction mean? Well, nonfiction means true. So I know that literary nonfiction must be true. So the things that I'm going to read in a literary nonfiction book are going to be true things that really happened in the world. If it is true, that means that it must be made up of facts. Oops, can't type. Made up of facts. So real things that have happened in the world, information that we need to know. So we know that it is true, and then a literary nonfiction book is going to have lots of facts. Let's look at our second word now that we've figured out that it is nonfiction and that it is true and made up of facts. Our second word here that we haven't looked at is literary. Well, I don't quite know what literary means, but I see that it is I think it's very much like literature. So what does it mean if something is like literature? Well, literature. If something is like literature, it means it must be like a story. So, literary nonfiction also has aspects that are like a story. So, if I think about literary nonfiction, I know that it is true, it is made up of facts, but it also is going to have parts that read like a story. Well, if it has parts that read like a story, what does that mean? It must mean that it has a plot, must mean that it has characters, and it must mean that it has conflict. So, I know these things so far about literary nonfiction. It is going to read like a story. It is going to have a plot and characters and conflict. But everything that happens in literary nonfiction is going to be true and a fact. So that is what we are going to be reading. We are going to be reading literary nonfiction this quarter. Now, another thing to know about literary nonfiction is that it varies. Literary nonfiction varies in structure. So you might have a literary nonfiction book that feels kind of like a memoir, or you might have a literary nonfiction book that feels more exactly like a story. It just happens to be true. Or you might have a literary nonfiction book that feels a lot like a science textbook, but it just has some story parts to it. So, depending on the type of literary nonfiction book that you choose, it might feel really different. One last thing to know about literary nonfiction is since it is nonfiction, literary nonfiction includes nonfiction text features. So, nonfiction text features are things like diagrams and headings and tables and photos. Because these things are nonfiction, they are going to have pictures and tables and diagrams and things that sometimes almost look like a science textbook that are going to help you out to understand what is going on in the book. Okay, so that is what we are going to be reading, literary nonfiction.